Order. We'll set off the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll look for a motion to accept the minutes. I've read and reviewed them, and they're fine. For the 8th and the 22nd.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. Okay, first order of business, acknowledgement of the baseline documentation for the Leonard Conservation Restriction. Oh. Sorry.
Good evening, everyone. Vanessa Johnson, for all of us, Greenbelt Association. So the last piece of administrative work for the Leonard Conservation Restriction is the baseline documentation report. This is the report that documents what the property looks like and what's happening on the property at the time that the conservation restriction was recorded. So we've completed that report, and it just needs to be signed and acknowledged by the town of North Andover.
Okay, any questions?
Any surprises?
No, actually, it's a spectacular piece of property. I mean,
Primary encroachments or trespasses?
no, actually, not a one.
Excellent.
Except maybe by,
Almost.
a raccoon or a couple blue herons.
Jack?
No questions.
Deb?
No questions.
Doug? Okay.
I make a motion that we acknowledge the baseline documentation and authorize the chairman to sign on behalf of the commission.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. Thank you.
And the town will get a copy of this as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next one is CPA application for Fish Place, Essex County, Greenbelt.
So Vanessa's not going to really go into the proposal. I think this is Commissioner Manzi's parcel away from his primary residence that he has a hayfield on. It's been on the sort of open space property acquisition list. It's of interest to Greenbelt and the town as a trail connection, protection for Mosquito Brook, multiple things. But at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Vanessa. She's just looking for a support letter.
So we have applied to the CPC this year for funding to help acquire this property as permanent conservation land. It's still in negotiations, so we actually submitted an application with a big blank in it for the number. But you can see this is the property right here. It sits at the base of Greenbelt's Farnsworth Reservation, which connects to our Bruin Hill Reservation and the town's Bruin Hill parcel. It is connected to Purgatory Lane, which is an ancient way, which comes out onto Lancaster Street right here. But what's most exciting about this property is this. So there's an access easement that goes with that land. So if we are able to buy this property, that will allow a trail connection to the town's Foster Farm, which would be a great trail connection right there, direct, that will bring you onto this gorgeous piece of land and then up into the Farnsworth Reservation. So it's just a spectacular piece of property, and if you're so inclined, it would be wonderful to have a support letter from the Conservation Commission.
Any questions, Joe?
Just timing, when do you need the support letter, sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I already drafted it.
Okay, good.
Well, the warrant, I think, for town meeting for CPC purchases is probably due in the next few
I
weeks.
think that's right, yep.
So that
we're
would,
getting pretty close.
yeah. I guess I just question the statement that it's intended for permanent conservation purposes. Is there some specific ideas? Is it a conservation restriction that the CR would be seeking, or would it be purchase of the property?
We're
or-
hoping it'll be a purchase of the property, and whether the town would own it and we hold a conservation restriction, or we own it and the town holds a conservation restriction is really, it doesn't matter to us. We would just like to see it permanently preserved and owned. If we own it, then we will be managing it, putting up the signage and all that. If the town owns it, that'll be the town's responsibility to do that.
Okay. Is there all right, I understand the source of funding from the CPC, the community preservation. Is there a source of funding from Greenbelt right now
We're
to
still
partially own?
working on that aspect of it. So, but there will be some contribution likely from Greenbelt as well.
Okay. Just one last thing. I can see Mosquito Brook, what I think is Mosquito Brook. Would you mind, all right, that is the way it goes, all right.
Yeah.
That was really my question.
It is the southern boundary of this property.
It's a beautiful, diverse piece,
It is.
definitely worth preserving.
It really is.
I'm all set.
Deb?
So you're going to be going before the CPC this year then?
Yeah, we've been once
Okay,
to
yep.
present the initial application, and there's kind of a placeholder there for us until
Okay,
we can
great.
get them a number.
Thank you.
Doug?
No question.
Okay.
I do have just a follow-up. I'm sure you guys have looked at the logistics of it all, the legalities more than logistics. CPC funds is obviously our Community Preservation Act monies that are authorized. Can ownership convey to another party for open space preservation, or does it have to stay with the ownership of the town?
As long as the town gets an ownership interest, so a conservation restriction is a legal ownership interest, that qualifies.
It's still, all right,
Yeah.
very good. So, all right, I'm all set.
Okay. So we'll get that letter again.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do you want to make a motion to support, or you don't think you need that?
Let's do that.
Yeah, just,
Yeah, you do that.
I move to support the purchase. And authorize the chair to support the letter on behalf of the commission.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Opposed? And that's unanimous.
Thank you.
RDA for 1160 Great Pond Road, Brook School.
Good evening, I'm Anthony Cleese with Whitman and Bingham Associates, here on behalf of Brook School. We also have representatives from Brook School here tonight. As you may recall, it was 2 meetings ago, we were before you for an RDA for work associated with the new Art Center project. That involves some work that going to move some earth to regrade out a soccer field near the lake. Unfortunately, we ran out of easels today, but if you recall, we had to work down, the lake was down in this area, we had a wetland system here. And so we had gone through that a couple of meetings ago, and some of the outstanding items with the commission was, you notice stockpile area. We've shown that on the plan up in this section here, as far away as we could from the wetlands to stay in our work area. Also was a concern about making sure this is clean fill. So we did add a note on the plan, the fill must be clean. And then as a follow-up to that, planning board had some concerns with that as well, and so Brook School is committed to having a geotech engineer at the location of where the fill is coming from at the new Art Center building. There'll be a soils expert on site monitoring the soil that's going to be trucked over. If there's anything that's shouldn't be going over there, that'll be separated, and they'll also be on this side as well, inspecting it again as it's being placed. So it's kind of a double check to make sure that the material that's going in here is clean fill for that. And the other, I believe we were kind of holding off last time to let us go through the planning board a little bit. And so we've had 2 hearings with the planning board, last one being last night, and we've addressed all their concerns, and we expect to have conditions voted upon at their next meeting. And if you'd like, I can go through some of the things that they brought up and that we addressed, or whatever you'd like to proceed with.
We have some questions. I know we had some questions the
Sure.
last time we had. Joe?
Well, I think the first time they were here, have you been here once or twice? You've
Just
been-
once.
Yeah, so the first time, and the last time that you were here, it was about the grading. That part we were pretty well squared away with. It truly was the quality of the material coming in. There was some talk about, I think Jen had pointed out some additional erosion controls that we probably wanted, which I think I'm seeing on this plan, this revised plan.
That we were adding
Did we-
additional controls. I think
Maybe that came out prior to the meeting, that you wanted to curve a little further up that left-hand side?
No, they proposed to come all the way up the left-hand side. I think that was my question at the last meeting. 'cause
Okay.
Sometimes,
But they are going up that way?
Yep, they are going all
Yeah,
the
so I
way
think it
up.
was limited to our concern with, the quality of the material coming in, and, hate to say it, leaving it open in the off chance that the planning board required a plan revision. And so, maybe
Timing was the
are we
other
in the same
discussion.
place, or?
We had the other, so it was the stockpile area, which Lou asked for, which is on the plan. Lisa had asked them to show more grading, which they also did after that first meeting. And then there was just the questions about timing. You guys didn't want they agreed, there's now a lot of plan notes about the contractor being responsible for, not opening up the whole site, trying to phase things so that, over the course of their work, we don't have this, big open area. So, all those things are addressed.
So I guess the last question is have they progressed far enough through the planning board process to be convinced that there are going to be no more plan changes?
Correct.
their
Not,
end.
I mean, if anything, maybe I don't know if there's anything at the front, but certainly not with this portion.
That was the concern, was would they, under their watershed permit jurisdiction, would they have commented on this? They would have by now.
Yes.
Okay, I'm all set.
No question.
That was to reinforce what Jen just said, and Joe, one of the concerns of ours was to open up that whole side of the soccer field, and you were going to stabilize as you went along.
Absolutely.
Is that going to be set up in a pre-construction meeting, or is that going to be part of the order conditions?
So they'll be doing a a construction schedule, and they have a contractor on board. I think that's something that can be stressed when we get that schedule. If it doesn't seem to stay that, then we'll make sure. I also put some conditions in our special conditions that go with the negative determination, some requirements, so.
And also, you were planning on starting in June,
Yes.
correct? Okay, I'm all set. Yep. Okay, motion?
What are the conditions, Jim, you're recommending?
It's funny, I debated copying them and not giving you all a set since I had already drafted them and I didn't do it. And my copy does not seem to. So the copy was supposed to be double-sided, and guess what? I got the wrong one. The conditions were for pre- and post-construction inspection, that we get all of the monitoring reports that the planning board will require, just copied on them so that we know what's going on as well. That we get a copy or an electronic copy of the SWIP, because they will be required to file one, and we want to know that happens. And I think and one about the
Monitoring
timing.
reports.
What's that?
And copies of monitoring reports.
We're getting copies of the
That's-
monitoring
yeah.
reports, yeah. So a little more than the average conditions on an RDA, but I think well warranted and keeps this kind of simple for them, at least on our end.
I move that we issue a -3 determination with the aforementioned conditions.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. You're all
Thank you,
set.
thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. 242-1701 Zellford Street, requested continued at 322.
Oh, tomorrow's fine.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Either way.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous.
Who did what? Sorry.
Otherwise,
Deb moved, I seconded.
I'm sorry.
These are continuing.
Okay.
Yes, these are continuances. 242-1700, 203 Katuah Street, requested continued to April 12th.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. Okay, first order of business, 242-1689, Salem Street, lots 1-3. Hi, Phil.
So the planning board met on this, met last night, and my understanding is that they issued a frontage exception and some decisions relative to the common driveways. That sort of allows this project to move forward. It'll require a land disturbance permit, and I think you'll file your official A&R, correct, still?
We do, right, we could not file the A&R until the special permits were approved. So we'll wait for that appeal period, then file the A&R plan with the planning board. But they did approve the project. They had us look at a variety of, I'm assuming you remember the project, yeah, okay, yeah.
Oh, we'll get it back up.
So we
Hold
had,
on.
2 frontage exception lots with a common driveway serving them. So the special permits were for the frontage exception lots, the common driveway, and then 1 lot not having access through its frontage because it was on a common driveway on another lot. There's 1 lot in the project that's a conforming lot. And one of the things they had us look at was to flatten the driveways a bit. By doing that, we wound up having to disturb more land. As you can imagine, as we had to get the driveway lower, we had to have the cuts bigger. We created more runoff. So what Jen has up there now is a later plan. That was the flatter drive, and that was, the board decided not to follow that. They'd rather have less disturbance. This plan would have had 40% disturbance on the lot versus the plan we submitted originally and we've submitted to you has 35% disturbance of the woodland on the lot. So that's pretty much it. I can go into anything you want on it, but I thought the one thing you were waiting for was approval by the planning board before this board acted.
I have little to say other than just a general comment between the willingness of the applicant and this commission and even the planning board. This is one of those permits that everybody gave a little bit and got something that works. I'm shocked.
Well, before we go too far, because I don't think the plan is, unapprovable, but according to the Wetlands Protection Act, they're supposed to have filed for all applicable permits. So this leaves the land disturbance permit as something that needs to be filed for, and they don't have. I don't know that any...
Technically, in your rules, and this is different, but your rules and regulations, if you receive a permit from planning, if you receive a special permit, approval for a definitive plan, or notice of an order of conditions from conservation, you are exempt from filing the land disturbance permit. That's the way your regulation's written. Now, they've asked us to file one on the planning board decision, but the rules and regulations do not require it. What they assume is that if there's a review by conservation and planning, those conditions are taken care of.
Right, so that is actually partially correct. The majority of this site is outside of commission jurisdiction, and you did not review it for the land disturbance impacts, neither the swales along the driveway, the stormwater implications. You strictly reviewed it as disturbance in riverfront area. So if we want to go back and do that kind of review, then I think that would be one thing. But we didn't review this project we required some additional erosion controls, but we basically knew that, and Phil has admitted since the beginning of the permitting that a land disturbance permit would be required. Have that in multiple emails. But that aside, we didn't really review anything above our jurisdictional line. That said, there is, and this plan shows, and I don't know if it was discussed at the last hearing since I wasn't here, another potential off-site isolated wetland, which again has drained and emptied, but we don't know the characteristics of that. It hasn't been investigated. No one's dug any soils. No one's seen if it holds water come spring.
We should mention on that, though, Jennifer, just to be fair. Steve Erickson from North Environmental never saw that when he walked the site originally and flagged the wetlands. Steve Erickson also did the soil testing. You can see the soil tests are very close to where that puddle is. Dan O'Connell from my office was out there during those tests in June. That was not there. I think that area was formed just because of, if you remember the winter, we had rainy weather, cold weather. It led to frozen ground, and then we had rain after that. And I think that's what led to the formation of that. It may be a vernal pool or a ephemeral pool, but it is not there now. It was there less than 2 months ago, and it disappeared since that time. I sent Jennifer photos of that on Monday.
Right, I guess, but again, it hasn't been investigated.
So,
And we did modify the plan to move our work away from it, if it is in fact.
Set me straight. I don't ever remember reviewing a land disturbance permit that wasn't within our jurisdiction for anything before.
So the way
How does that jurisdiction come into us?
The way the land disturbance permit is written is if one of, or both boards have jurisdiction over the lot. So basically, so you wouldn't be duplicating review.
Right.
You wouldn't have to file for a special permit or subdivision and a land disturbance permit. You wouldn't have to file for your order of conditions and a land disturbance permit. That, however, has, through policy and through practical application, has been somewhat modified. So the first time it was applied was Stephen Street, when those 4 houses along the hill.
Yeah.
Basically, you had very limited jurisdiction. A couple of the driveway entrances and some drainage or some work done in the street, but we had no jurisdiction on those hillsides. Planning board also had no jurisdiction because they were A&R lots. And so it was decided that given the limited jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission, the land disturbance permit was needed because this whole hillside was going to be disturbed and nobody was overseeing how that would be done. So there have been applications now where we've seen that basically everybody has some limited jurisdiction, but no one really has jurisdiction over what is the big impact, which is disturbance of more than an acre on a very steep slope with resource areas just, off-site.
I guess my position is this, and I thought Jen was inferring that you shouldn't approve this until we get the land disturbance permit. And I just think, we filed this in October. And it just drags it on and on. Bureaucratically, we have to file, as planning is requested, that we file a land disturbance permit. Fine, we'll file it. But it's nice to get things out of the way. We have a permit from planning for the special permits we need. It would be nice to get this done, and then from there, we can go with the land disturbance permit. I think we've met all the conditions to satisfy this board on the conservation issues. I think while it's correct, the rules say you're supposed to apply for or have obtained all permits before you apply to this board, the permitting process is getting so involved. Obviously, you don't apply for a building permit till you have a permit from here, so you don't get all your permits before you come to this board.
Building
So-
permits have always been excluded from that.
Well, I would just ask the board to please vote on this and get this off the table and let us move on.
The planning board does.
Planning board,
Planning board already looked at this, why the hell didn't they review
Why
that
did they
at
do
the
what
time?
It
Jen's
wasn't
now asking.
filed. It wasn't filed under that.
you don't file a separate application per
No,
se.
well, they should have known that they would have to deal with it, so that under their review of the whole project, they could have handled it at that time, under their review, and satisfied all things. Otherwise, this is a complete waste of time and a waste of the applicant's money and time.
That's the way I see it, too. I mean, I understand Jen's concern, but it seems to me we've come this far that somebody should have seized jurisdiction to this discussion way before tonight. And
Well, I've been pointing that out, and I think we started down that path. You asked them for construction sequencing. We didn't receive that. We didn't really get into the drainage swales and the drainage structures. We did have some discussions about soil testing and proximity of septic systems to detention basins, but we didn't focus on that. We focused on, the location of the perennial stream. That became one of the big topics of discussion.
I don't think that's an omission on our part. I think our jurisdiction
Well, the point is, I
was
don't,
somewhat limited, but there nonetheless. We focused on it diligently. At the same time, we recognized that the planning board had some say in understanding how these driveways would be shared and how the frontages would be carved up. And I think and again, I'm not casting any aspersions their way, but in the context of their looking at those alternatives in those types of waivers, I think the conversation of land disturbance comes into their jurisdiction far clearer than ours. And I just don't see how we address that now. I mean, someone has to. I understand. Maybe ours is simply a condition that acknowledges that a land disturbance permit is likely required, and that we reserve the right to modify the conditions based on that filing.
And we are required by the other decision to file one.
So, I mean, to engage in that conversation now, I'm agreeing with Doug, is not fair. It really isn't.
I have a couple issues still, though, and one is that the resource areas, also the back property, off-site wetland resource, was delineated in something like the 1990s, and we asked them, they got permission from 3 of the abutting landowners to go on the property to confirm that wetland line. That work was never done. There's now the other off-site wetland, and to be honest with you, I don't even have the record plan. I don't know what it is. It isn't the things I have here tonight, so.
We filed it with you originally.
Right,
You
but
should have
there are plan revisions, so the plan revision became the one you sent to the planning board with the less sloped driveways. That's the last plan I received, that's the plan I have tonight.
That was an alternative for planning board, and I gave it to you for informational purposes, but.
So it's not the record. I mean,
I'm not
that's not
sure
the
what the
record
record plan is.
well, we're getting down to basics here, Jen, and sorry.
That's all right.
We're getting down to basics. I mean, we used to always ask the very first question, are we positive of the line? Is the line the line? Is before we start any, what is the resource area? So if calling a line into question now is something I'm concerned about.
This is something I have asked for
And of course, the record
over
plan
and
is a
over,
record
though.
plan. But we've asked that from the get-go?
I have asked that from the get-go. In every set of recommendations I have given to you, I have mentioned that the off-site wetlands were not confirmed. And then, granted that the now new isolated area that I saw, granted with late on a site visit with the planning board, we had a drought summer. There was no water on this hill this summer. There was another sort of depression, you can see it on the, up here at this portion of the plan that we investigated, that was holding water at one point that, again, had wetland plants in it, and we thought about ephemeral pool status, but that water disappeared. I haven't had any chance, and nobody has told me that they've dug soils or looked at vegetation in this particular isolated area, nor do I know that I have permission to be on the property. But these are things that have been in every single report that I have given to you since the beginning of this project in October.
But
This is
as
not
far
new.
as the off-site wetland in the back of the property, when you look at the plans for that, it's in a steep ravine, you know? The wetlands didn't climb, our work is at least 130 feet from there. It would have to climb up a steep ravine to go beyond that point. It's not reasonable to assume that wetland moved. It just, physically, it just doesn't do that.
Well, my question is, by changing the grade of the driveways, is it going to impact the wetlands on the site?
No, we left, well, as far as wetlands on the site,
There are none.
you don't have any where we're working, okay?
But it's going to go downhill and across the street
Across the street,
to the riverfront.
right. If you lowered the driveway, would it affect, it affects the riverfront area on the property because you have to do more grading. And also because when I lower the drives, then I have a problem, the flow that wants to go up towards, kind of towards where that pond is or that wet area is that Jen's pointing out off-site, the driveway gets too low for me to get a culvert under it to get the water to flow properly in that direction. So I have to make that detention pond that shows there bigger than it was on the original plan. That takes up more area in the riverfront area. So we did not lower the driveways. We left them the way we had originally filed with the board.
The planning board accepted that.
Yes, they decided last night between the two plans, they preferred that plan.
So the plan that we have here is an alternatives analysis the planning board asked you to do, which they understood but didn't recommend approving.
Right.
It was the other plan that we saw at the last meeting.
Yes, that's correct.
That's still our record plan.
That's the record plan.
Does that plan have the other off-site wet area on it?
I don't know.
I don't think it does.
Well, it was submitted before you saw it, that's right.
Right, so.
Jack?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, a general comment first is, I guess I'm concerned about, requests by our office that seem to be ignored through this whole process since October. It's been several months and
No,
plenty of opportunity to maybe investigate or take a look at those off-site wetlands where you did have permission to
So
look at them.
I should say, we didn't ignore it. Now, remember,
it
we
seems like-
changed,
it
we
seems like there's-
stipulated to a change in the riverfront that we didn't even think was correct, but we did it as a sign of cooperation with the board
We
and with the
agreed.
agent. What?
We agreed.
We agreed. So we didn't ignore those comments, and we did address the property in the back, and we've discussed the fact
It
that
sounds-
it's well over 100 feet from any of our work, and it's in a ravine, and the reality is you don't have to reflag that to know where it is.
Okay, general comment, passed. Specific comment, or specific question, when was the land disturbance requirement required by the planning board?
Well, I'll tell you, we did a subdivision out on Boxford Street. It was submitted here. Just a little bit of that was within your jurisdiction, all right? We filed that with the planning board as a subdivision, submitted the engineering design, submitted the drainage calculations, and there was never a separate, and there isn't, as far as I know, a separate land disturbance permit. When we did Zarico's project up on Great Pond Road, we submitted to you and also the planning board. We submitted the engineering design and the hydrologic calculations. There was never a separate permit applied for. And as far as I know, there was never a separate permit issued, but those issues were covered in their review of the project.
Right.
Now, when we submitted this to the planning board, we submitted the engineering design as well as the hydrologic calculations. I think we even submitted them to you as well.
Right, but this didn't go out for review. Both of those
Well,
other
it didn't-
projects
it
went
didn't-
out for review.
Right, and that's not my choice.
So the projects submitted under subdivision and Tom Zarico's project was fully within your jurisdiction, including the stormwater management. So that one's out. We reviewed that in its entirety. There
But,
was no
no-
part of it we didn't review, so that didn't require a land disturbance permit. Boxford Street, subdivision approval by the planning board, full review, every single last aspect. These are A&R lots. These don't get that same kind of scrutiny and review. You all know that. You've been doing this for 20-something years.
There was not a separate application for a special, for
Because-
a land disturbance permit.
Because they were part of much larger permits. The whole subdivision, every single last aspect of it was reviewed and by the planning board and granted a subdivision special permit. It's just a whole different ball of
The
wax
planning board's jurisdiction here was just limited
to
to
frontage
nothing more than
exception.
frontage exception and shared driveways.
Correct,
That's what they gave the special permits for.
correct.
And
So they would not have gotten
They
into
did not
any-
review anything else.
They perhaps could have,
They looked at it, but
But
they
didn't.
didn't review it.
so that's why your original statement is now,
Review of it, so it sounds like.
Well, they,
It seems to me that the planning board is
I've been, since this was filed, I've been concerned about the way it's being permitted. It seems like the cart's been before the horse the whole time. I've, again,
it
put that
can't-
in my
I can't-
reports.
I can't do anything till I get the special permits. If I don't have the special permits, I can't do a Form A, and if I don't have the lots created, I can't do anything else, really. I did as much as I could. You try to limit how much money you spend for a client, and you don't want to spend money even doing a Form A plan officially until you know exactly what you're going to do.
I thought it was prematurely filed with us, not prematurely filed with the planning board.
there were enough unique circumstances here. I could see, I'm going to go back to my original statement, there was the whole question of the jurisdiction of the riverfront and how it affected the fronts of these lots had to be ironed out in order to give Phil the guidance in the direction of which way to go.
And in fact,
So he could then go upon the
and
planning
in
process.
fact, we changed the location of the common driveway as a direct result of filing that application. Had we not, this driveway would have been on the other side of the property, and then we would have come to you and had to change the whole
Yeah,
design again.
Not everything fits in a box perfectly, and this is one of those projects that doesn't. what makes it a little unique is that the planning, really, there is nobody who would have automatically picked up land disturbance review as part of their permit. Planning board could have, didn't. We still have something before us. We can, even though it's unusual, I suppose we can. And that's your concern, Jen, or to do it as part of this, or to do it as a separate filing?
I just don't think, I mean, if this had been filed, if the land disturbance permit and the R permit had been requested at the same time, this review would have been coordinated. So if planning says, you know, wow, those swales don't work, or that driveway's too steep, or you need a detention basin at the bottom of the drives, I don't know what's going to come out of that review. But if any of that happens, they're going to have to come back and amend this order. So I guess we could do it that way. It just doesn't seem like the right way to do it.
That's what I'm now hearing crystal clear, and apparently I'm dense today. What you're suggesting is to keep this open, to conduct the land disturbance review as part of this filing, and issue one decision, one order of conditions that addresses both land disturbance and Wetlands Protection Act filing through our order of conditions, single order of conditions. That's what you're proposing. Alternatively is close with blinders on for this project, knowing full well they have to file a land disturbance permit. It's likely going to come back to us. We're going to have the same conversation with another document, another separate proceeding, which is only going to create the possibility of revising our permit we're about to contemplate. So you're saying the first alternative is cleaner, to just do it under the context of this single permit review.
Sounds to me like the town dropped the ball.
Oh, trust me, we
Either
did
the planning
not.
board or the Conservation Commission dropped the ball in this whole
You
issue.
might have been tempted to not say that, because I don't think we did. I think it's the peculiarity of the site.
If you want, back in October, I told him to file for a land disturbance permit. Don't make
Go
this
either
about the
planning
town.
board
I've
or
been
the
asking for that.
Conservation Commission,
You
whoever
know
has
that.
jurisdiction.
Planning board
Handle-
says we have to file for it in their
They said
decision.
if they have to file with them for it, then you file with them for it. If that's
And
what their order is.
additionally, I'm told by Gene that the order we have to go in is we can't file a Form A until the appeal period's up on the decisions last night, so that's 20 days till we can file a Form A, and we can't file a land disturbance permit until we get the Form A signed. So we're at least a month away from that.
And it seems like that's pretty well mapped out and structured. It may be
It is.
unfortunate, but...
Yeah, it's the way it is. It's just, it would be nice for me to get something off the
Seems to me
table.
this whole thing should have been part of the original filing.
I so wish I could share all of my emails to Phil
Not separated the way it is.
from the very beginning of this
Waste everybody's
process
time.
about how I thought the process was being done wrong.
Conversation went along, Jen and I, about land disturbance permit and the flagging of the wetlands. I understand what you're saying.
I
If-
completely understand what Phil's saying.
I understand,
If
but
the-
the wetlands are way down below the.
And they're in a gully.
Right. I can give you that. But land disturbance changes the grades of the whole project, or most of it, and the drainage, now everything's changed, the detention pond and, I am, and you can't do
Right off
one
bat,
without the other.
The plans we're looking at here in hard copy are different than the one that's on the screen. I think these are the ones, well, these are the ones dated October, revised through February 17th. The triangular detention area.
That's the original one.
I guess to try to bring this to some fruition, I'm happy to, I would say leave the public hearing open for the sole purpose of let me draft an order of conditions. Let me share some of the emails with you about, from the very beginning, what I thought the permitting process should have been on this particular project. And then at the next hearing, I'll get some feedback from planning about land disturbance and what, if any, changes they think, or if they intend to send it out for review, or how they think that process is going to unfold. And then we can, at the next meeting, if you so choose, close, and we'll have, I don't have conditions drafted tonight anyway, so it would be next meeting before you reviewed those. And if there's any, additional information or process that you think should happen before you close, you can have all the information to make that decision at that time.
So potentially the same outcome,
Right.
decision issued at the next meeting, but leaving the hearing open to give the opportunity of additional 2 weeks of navigating these waters of which permit makes sense and how it gets done, or at least work out the details that maybe it becomes part of this, with an update at the next meeting, and it's the same end result. The order conditions could theoretically
Right.
come out
I'm
of the
going
next
to
meeting.
draft it as if you were going to close it, and that we are going to condition whatever it is that still needs to be done. And then, with those conditions in mind, you can decide to close it, and having the knowledge that I have since the beginning of what this thing was filed, what we were asking for.
And just consider, and one of the things I've discussed with Jen over the time, on the land disturbance permit. When we first came in, that common driveway was on the other side. Had we done a land disturbance permit with that, without knowing where the driveway was going to finally be, it wouldn't have been the right one, correct? So then we moved the driveway. Then we get to planning board, and planning board says, we want the driveway at a shallower grade. So now, had we done the land disturbance permit ahead of time and all the work required for it, right, we would have been wrong. We would have to redo that again. So until we get to this point, we don't know what the final project is.
Again-
And that's an important consideration.
We can keep arguing, but I didn't ask for the land disturbance permit first. I asked that wondering why the conservation permit was being filed when there was all this work to be done, special permits and all those sorts of things. It seemed like the cart was before the horse.
So let me ask you, and again, I don't want to tear this whole meeting up on this topic. If the filing of the NOI for this, that's now before us, the shared driveways, the relocated driveways, the riverfront, went so far as to say, and we're also discussing and filing concurrently within the application, the land disturbance permit, we're going to have this whole conversation in that one singular context, we would have reviewed the whole thing and been able to. So, I mean, it's just simply a reluctance. And again, I know that you can't do it ahead of time. You can't do it separately. You got to do them at the same time. It's just a complete waste of time. That's where we're at. We've gone back and forth between planning board. We've got a design that we believe solves everything.
Right.
Except for the question of land disturbance permit
Right.
and the impacts from it.
Right.
I think we're 2 weeks away.
I'd still like to know, has the planning board have they required a land disturbance permit?
Yes, it's
Okay.
in this, in the order of conditions for the special permit, it's required.
Okay, and when was that issued?
Today.
Today?
Because the
Okay.
meeting was last night.
The meeting was last night, okay. Is that the first that you've spoken to the planning board about land disturbance permits
No,
and the requirements
I've
for
talked to
some?
Gene about it as we've gone along.
Okay, for the duration of the project?
Well, it's the same issue about, what are you preparing it for if you don't know what's going to be approved? That's the problem, Where are the driveways? Do you like the driveways? Or what's the steepness of the driveways? I mean, the planning board imposes things like, and this is outside of the land disturbance permit, they want to limit the amount of vegetation cut. Well, there's no rule or regulation regarding vegetation. So if there's a rule that says you can't disturb more than 50% of the lot, then I could design that way, right? But there's no rule like that. But they have their own feelings about what should be done in a project. So until you finally get an approval from them, you don't know where you're going on the next step.
So
That's all.
it's been an evolving process with the planning board,
Right.
okay? When did you establish this current plan that you're presenting before us now? I mean, how long ago did this design emerge?
January, maybe, I think.
January?
I forget. What's the date on that?
February.
February.
But again, I think those changes were the result of our last meeting.
Okay, so it's a month old, and it seems like you've had some pretty good certainty as to what the final design that the planning board's going to be happy with.
Not until last night.
Well, you didn't get approval until last night, but
Right, and they didn't decide on which design they wanted till last night.
until last night.
Yes. Right.
Okay, so really, last night was the first you've gotten certainty on what design you can go forward with.
Yes.
Okay, and then you're under some time frame constraints to apply for a land disturbance permit.
Yes.
Okay, but our regulations say that we really shouldn't issue an order of conditions until all the permits have been applied for, including a land disturbance permit. Is that right?
There's a, yes, you're supposed to, doesn't always happen that way.
Yep.
The rule says you're supposed to apply for all obtainable permits.
We've talked around this many times tonight, and I just want to get the facts straight in my mind. Maybe I think differently than some of the
And I
other
think if you look
commissioners
at, if
did.
you
In
look
my
at the word
mind,
obtainable,
I think
is that
pretty
permit
linearly,
obtainable?
and this is how I have to organize it in my mind. I think I have it straight. So I'll pass it on to you.
Can I ask a follow-up question to Jen, though? So with the planning board's decision as of last night, is there expectation that we deal with the land disturbance as part of our order of conditions we might issue? Are they
No.
asking it separately?
They're going to deal with it separately.
They are going to deal with it
So,
separately?
well, they're the, permittees of the land disturbance permit, not us. They are. I mean, that was just decided over the, course of doing that permit. And having it approved at town meeting and then the
So
subsequent
us
regulations.
leaving it open for the purposes of discussing land disturbance unto ourselves is a
No,
moot point.
no, right.
It's, the question is leave it open for them to conclude their process?
Right, and if it changes the plan, then that's an amendment with the back with us. Why close right.
Or if you close it, we have projects come with modifications all the time. But that's what the whole logic behind applying for something ahead of time is
Right.
to prevent.
Unfortunately, it seems with this incident, the planning board should have realized, one, we got more than an acre of land that's disturbed. That's going to require a review for a land disturbance permit. So it should have been conducted at the same time they did their review of this project, because knowing full well that whatever requirements they have could very well have an effect on how much land is disturbed and to what degree it's disturbed. So they should have realized that, hey, what we
Again,
want
not the
is
planning
going to have an
board.
effect on it. So for them, they know damn well, they got the land disturbance responsibility under their bailiwick. They should have just said, look, we're going to conduct it at the same time and not play these games. Well, it's not strictly asked for.
It wasn't games. The permitting sequencing was decided by the applicant, not by the Conservation Commission Department or the Planning Board.
They disturb more than an acre of land, that automatically kicks it in.
Someone should, the
Oh.
applicant should have seen it for certain and applied for it.
Yes.
I mean, if
In
they could
the
turn around
reviewing,
and not disturb an acre of land in the process, then perhaps you should have done that. And avoid that permit altogether.
Well, we have, instead of beating the conservation and planning board up,
I'm
They
going to
have-
provide you with the discussions that were had and why the decisions were
so we
made.
gotta continue anyways. And the other question I have to Jen, are you, I agree with Phil as far as the back wetlands, where it's such a drop off, he's not gonna go up to that far anyways, I believe.
I think we're 130 feet.
Okay.
I just have, these
The
things
other
aren't
wetlands on the
surveyed.
side.
They're placed on the plan based on other plans done by other people. So their location is not exact.
Yeah, but it's
Seemed like there was some unresponsiveness.
the one, well,
In that case.
if he's saying that there's a big drop off, which is,
I can give you that plan that shows,
okay.
it's for
The-
Campbell Forest.
All right, and the other one, the other wetland you were concerned about, does he really have to have that, should we have that reviewed or not?
It can't, there's no water in it now.
There's no water.
It's soil, right, but having the presence of water does not a wetland make. I mean, we all know that. It's hydrology, plants, soils, there's investigations of that area that could be done. Or, the other thing about it is we can condition that, it be examined for ephemeral pool status come the spring. If it holds water for 2 months, come spring, it's an ephemeral pool. If it doesn't, then it's not.
Well, does it, all right, that's fine, but does it impact, if it is a wetland, does it impact the project that's in front of us?
I think he has it on the
does-
plan,
If
so
you see where those test pits are, the purple,
they moved
they
the
were
septic
test pits,
system.
that's where the septic system was. And when Jen mentioned that standing water over there, I moved the septic system up on the hillside rather than down in the flat.
So regardless if it's a wetland or not, it won't impact the project.
Right, I think if it's a wetland, the bend in the driveway would be within the 100 feet.
The little driveway would be, is all right. Well, we've had septic systems in the 50.
the bend in the driveway would be within the 100 feet.
Yes.
But the limit of disturbance is still far greater than the 25, no disturbance.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
All right, so it doesn't impact.
So it would also, if it's ephemeral pool, be 50/75.
So we can condition that,
I can.
okay,
Yeah, I mean, it's not unreasonable to examine it in the spring.
okay.
That's reasonable.
And the backside
Probably wouldn't
with the
impact it.
elevations, to what you say, and like you say, you're 130 feet away from that back house. I mean, it seems to me that I can see that. My main concern, Phil, is the regrading of the driveways and us approving the drainage and how it's impacting the wetlands. That's my only concern about not wanting to approve it, even though, it kind of, like you say, it's a lousy situation we have it set up.
Okay, yeah.
It really is. I mean, you can spend 2 months with planning even if they're on your side.
Well, we did have 3 meetings with them at least. Anyway.
So Jen, you'll be able to get a sense for how close, or, the magnitude of the modifications after the land
I'm just going to
disturbance
ask,
permit?
given the review that it's already had, how much additional review do they think that the land disturbance permit will require?
Okay? All set? All right, so we need a motion to continue. So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil. Next one is 242-1699 One High Street, North Andover Mill.
So I updated the plans at my whole drive, and somehow the drive I put on my computer isn't the one that's showing up tonight. So I don't know what you want to look at as far as what I have here, but I have the, I don't know what the modification plan is. Nope, that's your other modification. So I have the project update. You probably just want to review, because I don't think the plan itself changed between the 2 meetings. So you should have a copy of a memo that they submitted, and I think at this point, we have the order of conditions drafted. It's more just sort of the contingencies that are out there at this moment. So if you want to review that.
Yeah, if you want me, I'll just start with an update
Sure.
where we are on the project and the points we're still dealing with there. We do have, we've installed the 48-inch pipes virtually from the future dam structure to the future transition structure into the culvert, and buried that and basically stabilized the site in its current condition. There's a picture of the HDPE pipes sticking out essentially into a pit, and then you can see the opening to the culvert on the other side. That area happens to be a lot of concrete. We had to jackhammer our way into that area. In some ways, it's covered in a lot of soil in this picture. But we show in our plans a vault structure dropping into there. And we've stopped work on that for now because we've been doing so much jackhammering to try to clear out space for the structure. We've submitted the NOI and want to try to get this approval so we can, as I think we have a pretty complete plan. We followed up with some of the other filings that Jennifer had questions about. But ultimately, we're fighting a little battle in there. In some ways, it's functional as an opening. We can use the concrete around it, so we're considering some other options there rather than dropping in that structure. That's really the only challenge we're confronting now. We've been able to clear the rest of the way. The structure's in shop drawings, the dam structure's in shop drawings. We're trying to source the actual headworks from the plans that were included in the NOI to make sure, which I think was Lisa's keynote, that we would get the same elevations, be able to hold the pond at the same elevation.
You would have provided this. I know this isn't the exact structure, but
Right.
you will have some kind of.
Something like that.
Yeah, about the.
Yeah, this manufacturer apparently is out of business now, but
Oh, it
we've
is?
sourced a few other people who do the same thing. timber's actually very hard to get. It may be metal instead, but it'll have the same functionality as what you see here. And we'll be very careful with the elevations that our options are, that they mimic exactly what's been there. Otherwise, I think, we're hoping to be able to, we're still working on that second emergency permit. We're hoping to close this out if we can, so we could release the dam structure and anything else, which is, lead time of 3 weeks or so. And then we can come back and drop all that in the next month after our emergency work order will run out, and hopefully we'll just be working off an order of conditions on our application.
The dangerous thing, I went to school this past Saturday and sat in on an Army Corps workshop that you were in that particular session, but you were at the conference, right?
Yes,
Yeah, I remember seeing you there. So with regards to the Army Corps jurisdiction at the inlet itself, at the pond, I think I'm more clear than I was prior to taking that workshop, but I'm still not perfectly clear. It seems like that it is jurisdictional under the Corps, but I'm not certain at what level.
So-
Self-verification versus the actual filing, right?
Yeah, so where we are with that is, we were asked to review the permit status of the Army Corps 404, the water quality cert, in the Chapter 91. And both ourselves and the wetlands consultant independently came up with the same analysis, that on the Army Corps side, we believe that the project falls under the self-verification rules. Okay, so what has happened since we last met and we reviewed these, the self-verification form was submitted today to the Army Corps, and I have an email and a phone call into the individual who manages this part of the program to discuss the project, to confirm our evaluation of it, and it's going forward to make sure that we have the right permits. We're well below the 5,000 square foot threshold, and it's one of those situations on the Army Corps side where, again, we've taken the initiative to file a form, and then we want to have a follow-up conversation. On the other two permits, we went through and looked, and it looks like we do not trip the Chapter 91 because we are not in the navigable waterways with anything, and the same thing with the water quality certification. We don't trigger any thresholds there. So that's kind of the status, is until we have the conversation with Ms. Jasek at the Army Corps. We'll either be able to verify that it's a self-verification, or have to move to the next level. But
Give you any indication of what kind of timeframe that takes?
she usually responds every other day or so. I'm working with her on a couple other projects, so I'm hoping to have a conversation with her tomorrow, actually. I sent her an email this afternoon when we received the executed form, asking for a convenient time to talk to her in the next couple of days. So that we'll let you know as soon as we know.
And it doesn't stop us from issuing an order, because it's not our requirement. I just didn't want them to wind up in the situation where we approve everything and then all of a sudden they need further permitting and they're stuck. So
Yeah, and
I just
definitely
wanted to make sure.
appreciate that. So that's where we are with that, with the Army Corps permit, so.
And that's where I was on Saturday, I felt as though there was some jurisdiction with them, but I wasn't certain if it just went only as far as self-verification. But you've started that process, it'll play itself out.
Yeah, and we went through there's a bunch of criteria for that, and some of it regards the pipes and, the flow characteristics. And we went through that analysis to make sure that we weren't altering any of those things. So, my feeling is, I'm probably, if you were to ask me, 95% sure we're down the right path.
Okay. And under the second emergency cert, I mean, everything's going,
I think Heidi
Well-
issued that in my absence, so you have that, correct? So you have
Yes, that
30
would've
days
been
under, so there's no
day after the
issue.
last meeting, right?
Last meeting.
I was out there on Friday, no, when was I out there? Yesterday. It's been a long week already.
It's only Wednesday.
I know. It looks, I mean, to the extent that it looks good, it looks good. I mean, there are no wetland impacts, there's a lot of disturbance, but everything's being managed appropriately. One other thing that we did ask for,
There was an
You know,
issue with
there's-
stockpiles, wasn't there? Or has that been
yep, and
resolved?
that's all been resolved. There's erosion controls up around the entire very large amount of material, all on pavement across the street, all protected now. And I did ask for a dewatering detail because they do dewater, keep the pond at the certain level, but they're going to do additional dewatering when they put in those headworks, basically. And, you know, that will be sedimented material. So I didn't want that just to be going over and into that other pipe, which turns out also has a lot of sediment in it. And if there seems to be one huge ecological benefit to this project, that pipe's going to get cleaned out, which seems like 100 years of sediment buildup. What Tanya said, like 5 feet of
No, actually,
material
that
in
was
there.
the soil that was beneath the building, probably.
Right, no, it definitely is, but if you think about things that have been being washed out of the pipe, certainly now, if that's clean, it should be,
Office in there.
but anyway,
Okay.
there have been a lot of, work to get enough things submitted that we can issue a permit, and then whatever gets decided about, the piece that goes here, I've left enough wiggle room in the permit that we will just know before it's installed what it's going to be. And, if we need any time for review, then I'm sure we can get that.
I'm all set.
Yeah, I mean, my question was about, I think the change from last time was, last time it was precast outlet structure. Now it might be cast in place outlet structure. Not sure, we're still not sure at this point. I guess my main question is procedurally, can we really issue without knowing the nature of that? I know that the function is going to be the same for conveying water and all that.
This is pretty, this isn't this is pipes under the building type stuff. I think we want to know what it's going to be, but I don't think from a resource area standpoint, it's not going in a resource area. It's probably barely within buffer zone.
Correct, that's my understanding.
Yeah, we want it done right, but I don't think it's not necessarily a.
Basically, it's going to be suitable soils or something that holds it up from a foundation perspective. It's going to be a huge manhole in the closure of the pipes coming in and the closure of the pipes going out, pipe going out. And really, what more else would we ask for other than cleaning out the final product once it's complete?
I spoke to David about this in my office, who's been going to the site today. So we anticipate once the decision is made on what type of structure we're going to place, that will be submitted to the Conservation Commission for their review and concurrence.
So if we were to substitute something else for the structure that's in the current plan, that would obviously come in for review. And we have the same concerns. The access is, it's great access right now. So you can almost picture pouring an open top thing and be able to get, that would be our ideal. Fitting the structure in is proving a challenge, but if worse comes to worse, it would either be that or something similar to make sure we're complying with the.
To note too, you did, in the discussions, you're going to do some kind of cameras or something inside the pipe, which I think was
Al had raised that at the last meeting.
Yeah, and so depending on what we do in this location, it's a good spot for cameras to point in two directions, or if we leave it open, you wouldn't even really need cameras. It's going to be wide open, able to see what happens, and it would pick up any debris there. And there are a couple other locations we've picked. We've gotten some advice on cameras that could survive down there and work, and locations we could wire them from. So I think, again, if you want that as a condition, or, we're making some efforts to locate some of that. It's obviously an operational benefit to be able to see what's going on in there, if there are any future problems.
Almost there. Yeah.
Jen, this is for you. How many waiver requests are needed for this project?
I think it's just for the, construction in the no disturb zone. I don't think there's any other waiver. I mean, everything else, the alteration of bank, I guess, I mean, technically, you could say we're not going to get bank back. They're not going to create additional bank in this particular area, but they are proposing a buffer zone restoration plan. And I think I'd have to look back at the notice to see if it was filed as a limited project, but they're basically, with a water-dependent structure, I think able to go beyond the thresholds to do what they need to do to install this structure. They need to have a functioning bypass for the water from the pond to the other pond, so.
That's just where I was going to go with the waiver request for the 25. I mean, the reality is we would always require an alternatives analysis. We're actually waiving even the alternatives analysis because there's no other alternative.
Right.
You got to get the water in from the bank.
Right.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. So what are we going to do? We need a motion or are we going to continue?
I would just to approve, well, I mean, I guess it's still whether you close or continue, but I'm recommending at this point that you close. I don't think there's anything more to be gained now. And, you know, the condition that when they have the final design, you'll either present it to me or we'll present it to the commission if that's required. But I think everything else is in place and ready to go.
Okay.
Move that we close and issue it.
Waiver first, though, just approve the waiver.
I move that we grant a waiver request for alteration of bank and disturbance within the 25-foot no disturb zone as requested.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous.
And I move that we close and issue a decision within 21 days.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous. You're all set. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
You guys did a great job. Consider what you had.
It's not over yet.
Well, still working on it, but consider where you were and where you are now.
You're almost there.
I feel very fortunate. It's been a pretty dry winter.
Yeah, it has been.
Okay,
Yeah, probably, just in case.
next one is 242-1696-50 Royal Crest.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Kenneth Lanier,
Thank you.
here this evening just to hopefully finalize this request for a notice of intent. At the last hearing, we had continued the hearing in order to allow Jen to return from vacation, just to verify that she was comfortable with the plan and the tree removal. So we have discussed that. I added the fencing to the plan. I did bring some 11 by 17s if you'd like me to pass them out.
Did I give you guys 11 by 17s?
Drawing 93A.
Yeah, they have them too.
Okay, wonderful. So if there are any questions, I know that I did speak with Jen in one of the last emails, and I apologize, I didn't see it, it got caught up, and Jen sent me so many emails that I missed the beginning email, which asked to modify one of the plantings that we had suggested in our plantings schedule. And again, I think as long as we can condition this, that I coordinate with Jen prior to any installation of planting any of the vegetation, then we're completely amenable to that.
No, I think the only thing, we were ready to close the last time around, but we recognize that, Jen had concern with the tree disturbance. And are you satisfied with the limit of tree disturbance now? We didn't want to close it without you having that final turn in the barrel to comment on that.
So I don't think there's any alternative. It's basically going to, create one buffer zone for another. I think to the extent that we can leave trees close to that, that's a condition maybe we can put in. I didn't really quite know how to draft that, but I mean, where you're going to remove potentially up to I mean, it's 60 trees, but there aren't 60 big ones. They're
No,
they're
they're-
only, yeah, it's mostly
I
saplings.
mean, there are, there's probably a dozen large
yeah.
trees in each area that are, significant trees.
So that if there's anything, in laying out the design of the bioretention cell that can be left, then we can determine that. We can condition that we'll have that site walk pre-construction.
And again, I know that in that Building 25 sedimentation basin, there's one large tree in that area that, again, we're not using that basin for volume, more so as we're using it to clean and have a place to collect that stormwater and give it a chance to run around. I can coordinate with Jen when we go out prior to taking the trees down to just mark any potential ones that we could save.
Just one question. There was discussion about the fence.
Yes.
Have we decided what we're gonna use?
I know the client isn't fond of chain link, so we had suggested stockade, but Jen had stated that they would be concerned with not being able to see if anything was deposited on the other side. So I've actually shown on the plan that we're utilizing chain link. So I would assume that a 6-foot chain link is sufficient, and then there was a note added to the plan that Jen had asked me to add to ensure that we left it about 6 or 8 inches above the existing grade, just in case there wants to be some migration for some critters to make it back and forth.
Okay, so we are going with chain link.
Yes, sir, and it's shown that way in the legend and in the note.
I think, did you say it was 6-foot chain
Yeah.
link? I mean, I think 4-foot would be adequate. What you're concerned about is that nobody do things beyond it. So if they, they really don't want a 6-foot high chain link on that
Yeah.
berm, 4-foot would seem
4
to
would be perfectly fine with us as well. Thank you. I mean, are we okay if we go with like a black coated one?
Oh,
or
yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
okay, because
The least visible, the better.
yeah, they're not, yeah, they're definitely not happy about chain link, but if I can color it down, maybe they'll
And
be a
make
little
it
bit more.
shorter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, black, they make it in black, they make it in green.
Well, green, yeah, it almost blends in nowadays.
So it's an aesthetics thing, right?
For them it is, yeah, because everything about Royal Crest, as much as it's kind of an old-fashioned Tudor style, it's all wood and brown painted wood and,
You know what you can do, where the poles are, you can put little crowns on the top.
Yeah? Yeah, lances, yeah.
Do you have any questions?
No questions.
Sean?
No question.
Doug? Okay, motion.
First is to approve the waiver for alteration of the no disturb zone.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
One abstention.
One abstention. And then approve the project.
Move that we close and issue in 21 days.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
One abstention.
And one abstention. Thank you.
Wonderful, thanks very much, folks.
All right.
We'll see you soon.
All right, I'll get that out this week.
Oh, there we go. I appreciate it.
Okay, next one
You
is
too.
242-1697, 315 South Bradford Street.
All right, so our first new hearing of the evening. So somehow, every time I open this up, I have a different set of documents here, which is really just a good time. March 8th, here we go. It's in here somewhere, here we go. What would you like to see up there? Site plan set?
Yeah, probably the site plan set.
I also have some, I did a little, oops. It came out, but the little aerial analysis of the farm over the years. So these go back to the 90s and pretty much aerial photos every year since, so you can kind of compare what's happened. The good news is it's largely the same. I gave them all copies of the photos. They don't
Okay,
have the
great.
whole application, but they have
Okay.
the plan and the photos.
Do they have the letter? The cover letter? by any
They
chance?
might not have the cover letter. They have my description of the three separate projects.
Okay.
The letter dated December 7th.
Yes.
Oh, okay, then they do have the letter.
Set.
All right. Can I start? Good evening. My name is Phil Henry with Civil Design Group. We are civil engineers representing Mr. Michael Smolak of Smolak Farms. And we are before you tonight with a notice of intent to request some minor, what we would consider minor site improvements in multiple areas on the farm. There's actually 3 areas of improvements, 2 of which are within the conservation's jurisdiction. And I think it's probably most efficient to put up sheet 2, Jennifer, because it's got both areas. And I had submitted a narrative with the application that walks through all 3 areas, and I'll focus on the first 2, and then I'd be happy to even talk about the third. But area 1, we're calling the tent function area, which is located up here. Just for everyone's on the same page, Bradford Street's running along the page just off Locust on sheet 2. Dale Street is up here. So if you meander through the parking lot closest to Dale Street, there's an orchid, or I guess an apple hill, or a tree hill over here. There's multiple structures, existing structures, a restroom, a facility area, and then back here there's a temporary function area that is basically has an existing wooden floor, dance floor, and a dirt or a gravel floor that Mr. Smolak wants to stabilize. So we met with Jennifer out on site probably back in September or October. So it's been quite some time. But essentially, what we'd like to do is remove that existing or relocate that existing tent area and create a more permanent structure for the function area in the back. That area is roughly about 42 feet wide by 82 feet long, and the existing area is about 11 feet to the wetlands. As you can see here, we're proposing some mitigation area that sort of outlines that existing footprint. What you see here is the proposed footprint there. What we're doing is we're moving that tent area outside the 25-foot no disturb, and all the area within the 25-foot disturb area was what we're proposing to mitigate with shrubs. To handle some of the stormwater, as I mentioned, there is a pretty significant hill that contributes runoff across this area into the wetland along the north side. So what we want to do is we want to install a French drain along the upgradient side of that tent and then discharge that into the wetlands just to the southeast of that tent area. Paving structure, with the idea is to put sand in between the blocks so water can infiltrate through that tent area, but it's largely going to have a wrapping over it, a roof over it for the function facility itself. And then Mr. Smolak would also like to install a asphalt walkway, an 8-foot wide asphalt walkway from the existing parking lot to the tent area, just to provide a more stable surface for people walking to and from the parking lot. So that is essentially what the improvements are for Area 1. It's essentially, we're not changing the existing use of that. We're trying to stabilize it, and Mr. Smolak wants to make it a bit more attractive throughout the summer and spring months.
Well, we have to see if we have any questions on that one first, and then we'll move on to the second one.
I'm sorry, couldn't you?
We'll have, see if we have any questions
Sure.
on the first one. And you're in a butter.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Joe, do you have any questions on the first phase?
Well, I was never aware there was a tent out there or a function platform out there. And at what point does a temporary structure become a structure? And at what point, and I think a structure of this sort is a structure, just whether it's a fabric roof or not, it's a structure. And I don't think I'm not sure it was ever permitted, and I don't think it's permissible as a structure within 50 foot of a resource area. So we'll take it from there. I'm done.
Jack?
About the structure, is it proposed to be a tent type
Yeah, so
structure,
it's
fabric of
yes.
some kind? Okay.
So
And-
it's exactly what is currently there today. Right or wrong, we're not proposing the change of use, or actually the actual fabrics or support, we'll call it, itself. The only change is it's going from a partially wooden raised dance floor, for lack of a term, and with a gravel area to blocks with sand inside. So the idea is to not have it impervious, to still allow infiltration should there be runoff. But the goal is to intercept that runoff even up gradient of that tent area.
I don't think Philip understood my
Well,
position
think-
that I was raising. Do we know when that went in? Because I don't believe it ever came to us.
So I printed the aerials because I knew this would come up. We've known well, I think at least when the bathrooms were permitted, we realized that was being used as a function area. I think the farm has evolved over time, and that the uses that occur on the farm aren't really our jurisdiction. I mean, they are, I guess, if they cause impacts, but this area has the use, determining what can and cannot be done on this sort of non-agricultural portion of the property is in our jurisdiction.
Gotcha,
If there are
gotcha.
wetland impacts, then it's our jurisdiction.
I thought
This
that's what
is-
you were suggesting.
This
Okay.
is the area where the blueberry bushes were put in. It was mitigation for when work was done on that pond. That predated me, but we issued a certificate of compliance not that long ago. We have photos out there. So I've known for years that the use is out there. The tent is definitely a new, it's definitely evolved and gotten more sophisticated as it's been used. And I think we all know farms in this region, and I'm not advocating again for the use, but, to be viable, have to do more things than just be farms. We approve the animals to be moved and to become a much more improved area at one point not long ago. Again, there was some mitigation to put a buffer between the animals and a swale that's on the park. I mean, lots have evolved out there that, again, when structures come up and get moved, but the tent in and of itself, going up seasonally and coming down seasonally, I never construed as a violation. So,
I think it stopped, I might have even said violation, but I probably should stop short of the violation. But I think what's before us is a more permanent
correct,
structure
without a doubt.
that is, it's what it is.
Right.
And that's sort of what the nature of my question was. Currently, the surface where the tent sits, is that gravel right now with a raised, band area or something?
Yeah, there's a section of what currently sits underneath the tent is a compacted dirt, if you will, or some gravel, durable surface that people can walk on and sit on. There's tables and chairs. And then about a third of it is like a raised, assembled dance floor, like a parquet, essentially.
Like a low deck.
Yeah, something that sits probably 5 to 6 inches
Okay.
off the ground.
Okay. And then what is proposed is
Pavers.
instead of the low deck or for the entire
For the entire thing.
cross-section?
Yeah, so of the, call it 80 by 40 area, a third of that is currently this wooden platform.
And that's, I guess, where I'm linking up with Joe here, because we've got a bylaw that I think even mentions patios as considered structures within the 50-foot no-build zone, and this sort of sounds like a patio to me. So I think we might have a problem with what is currently proposed. No more questions.
Deb?
I'm just going to add that I concur with
The gentleman before me.
Sean? I agree. I'm a stickler for our setbacks, and unless there's some reason why this doesn't apply to our setback, or let me strike that our setbacks don't apply to this, it seems to me it should be 50 feet away from wetland.
The question is, how old is that structure? Did it predate the bylaw?
The structure that's out there, no, but I think Mike could probably, and maybe we should have done this, provide sort of a historical reference of use of the area, 'cause the aerials don't show it very clearly, but there have been other things out there over the years. It is sort of, that's why I'm saying that the use has kind of been transitional, like, he's done a lot to, I would say, again, this doesn't necessarily go to use, but like the animals were sort of previously in the wetland. The pens have kind of been moved and taken out, and things have been, so the use of the area has evolved. I wouldn't say it's an area that wasn't used before, and that the uses that were there weren't more detrimental to the wetlands than, let's say, a patio. And maybe we just, if you're going to say that there was some historic use, we need to know more about what that was, but I wouldn't say that the area has not been used.
What does historic use do concerning our setbacks?
Well, I just think if someone's requesting a waiver, there isn't another place out in this location where someone could erect a tent like this. As Phil described the land, it does go up very rapidly. There's just a slope. Without cutting into that slope, you could not put something of this size out there, which of course makes it a disturbance of more area and a bigger expense and all those sorts of things. But when we've had historic uses in places, pools or patios or enclosures or things that predated, we often work to make them better, move them away. That's why I was saying that the uses in this area have always gone right up to the edge of the wetland. That's why I recommended when I was out there that they put some kind of buffer. I'm not saying that you should, I think more evidence should probably be provided to support what has been in that location before.
Yeah, and I certainly appreciate, your stance, and you're sitting here saying, okay, when did this come into effect, and how did it come into effect? I guess from our perspective, right or wrong, we made the assumption that it was an allowed use and that it is in effect, and I guess from that perspective, we feel that we're further improving that degraded area
I want to be clear. It's not so much of how long it's been there. That's an admission of my own ignorance of not knowing it's there. The reality is it's a structure. It's a considerable change of that structure, and structures aren't allowed within 50 feet of a wetland. There's no, whether it's been there 10 years, it's a complete redesign, it's a complete change. And it's not allowed.
Unless there's a waiver.
Unless there's a waiver.
So the thing is, my point was, if this structure was there before our bylaw came into effect, before these 50 foot, then I would say they're modifying it some, then I would give them more credit to leave it there.
Looking at aerial photography, we all looked at aerial photography going back to
1990s.
1990s. The last one dated is 2001. The first time anything in that area that even has a resemblance of whitish color was in 2014, and in 2016 is clearly a roofed structure. So prior to 2014, very much in question.
It doesn't predate.
No, it's recent.
So plus the fact that this is a much larger structure, or whatever you want, it is a structure, that's previously there. I mean, they were going to just sort of replace in kind. We could bend a little bit, but
think of the illogical perspective. They're proposing concrete pavers porous surface with a friggin' roof over it.
What's the use?
What's the use of being porous? It's not. It's all runoff.
It's only covered seasonally, correct?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, so during the rainy season, when the roof is needed, it shows up as runoff, and then when the rest of the time, it can just soak through the pores? It's a structure, I'm afraid. I mean, I don't want to drive this conversation. Boy, oh boy, it's black and white, and it's not going to be a white roof.
Okay.
So I guess, just for clarification, is and I don't have the wetland regs in front of me, the definition of a structure, is it the roof overhang, or is it
The patio.
is it the surface?
The surface
The surface.
itself. I mean, we wouldn't, if somebody was trying to put that in the back of the house, we wouldn't allow it.
As a porch, we wouldn't allow it.
That's what I'm saying.
And those are folks that live on quarter acres or eighth of an acre lot. You know, so it's tough for us to not pay considerable attention to this.
This is a non-starter. I mean, this project.
That's why I want to do one phase at a time.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions on what we're talking about?
I actually have a number of questions.
Well, just on this one.
Well, with regards to this,
Right.
We received notification back in December, so now we're coming into March. I know there was a couple pushing back. And I believe that there was a request for this to go before the planning board. I don't know if that happened, if that did not happen, because we never got notification.
Yes, so
Of any planning.
it's not required to go before the planning board. It does not fall within the watershed protection district.
Okay.
So
But
they,
This is zone
they,
one residential neighborhood, so, and.
if that's a zoning thing, right, if that's a zoning thing, that's a whole different question. But I think planning was looking at this, that it needed a watershed special permit.
Okay.
And then, given the location of the amenities and where it drains to, it was determined not to be in the watershed district, because the watershed is basically on the other side of the road. It's not on this side of South Bradford Street.
Mhm.
So if anything from the project drained in that direction, then they were interested in a permit, but since it does not, then they did not require it. And there is a letter or something, but there were no hearings, you didn't miss
I'm
notification.
just trying to make sure. So when I was here a few years ago to try to get my fence put in, there was an absolute no 15 feet within the water, the culvert going through. I think you might remember, we had a fence going through. It was a pre-existing property before the Wetland Protection Act came through. The culvert goes directly underneath my
Correct.
backyard, but I could not even bring the fence up within
The
a
25-foot no disturb zone, right.
So I could bring it up to a certain point. I can't put leaves out, in the conservation area or anything else. And here we have a tent, and you got the noise, and now they're going to change the angle of the tent. What effect does that have? That now goes back to the Board of Selectmen in terms of what we've been discussing for a long time with regards to noise. There was a big noise issue.
Right, we don't regulate
Right,
anything
and
noise.
I don't want to step on
Right.
something that's not yours.
So the
but I'm just trying
25-foot
to catch up as to where this is going for our regards.
As of now, it's not approvable.
But, all right, so as of now, it's not an improvement.
Non-approvable.
Right.
Intent.
So then the question comes down to, is it even legal to have this up there by the zoning?
We're not
separate
zoning.
board?
Separate board.
Someone could come out here and propose a heliport within a certain distance of the, and we would look at it strictly from a wetlands perspective. Zoning says you can't put a heliport there, not our problem. So all we're looking at is wetlands.
Okay, so basically, it just goes back to a zoning, but wetlands as per perspective of this.
As of right now, we consider that structure,
Okay,
and it's in the 50. So that's not approvable.
okay, these are just questions I had.
Right, so that's the first phase. So that's why I'm trying to do one at a time,
No, that's fine.
okay? All right, so you have to work on that.
Yes. So just to close out Area 1, if I'm understanding the board correctly, it wouldn't be prudent of us to even seek a waiver for the structure with inside the 50. We have to respect the 50-foot.
Yes.
Okay.
or prove that there was, some kind of prior structure there that you're then making the situation better.
I wouldn't give, I mean.
Don't even go there.
Approved project,
If I
right.
can just say that, I think underneath our bylaw, to get a waiver, you must do an alternatives analysis. And we would look at whatever alternatives were brought to us before we made a final decision on what we do. Is that fair to say, folks?
That's if there was any wiggle room whatsoever. That's the bare minimum, but
Right,
I'm not suggesting that's a
But
prudent
that's what,
approach.
right, well, I'm not suggesting that we would, well, we look at everything that comes in front of us with clean eyes. So if there, but the alternatives are, there's a million alternatives on that property to put things and sizes and stuff, so it would be difficult. I can't imagine an alternative, but the applicant certainly has that right. I didn't want to foreclose that right for the applicant.
I guess one of the things that I've had discussions with Mr. Smolak about agricultural use and what is defined as agricultural use. So he's, even though guided by his consultant, was given advice that this was land in agricultural use and should be granted an exemption. Under the Wetlands Protection Act, it is not. And he's aware of that and is trying to comply. But I guess one of the things I want to point out is a lot of the property around here has been used as agricultural use and not sort of treated with the same respect that we give wetlands on developed properties. So the uses out here have been multiple. I'm just saying if there is an alternatives analysis to be made, he can't go put, again.
This doesn't make it right.
Right, but from the alternatives analysis, he can't go put this structure on his agricultural holdings. This is the only portion of his property that is usable for these types of uses. So I think his alternatives analysis isn't really limited to the whole farm, it's limited to this particular portion of his property.
That's his.
Right.
Yeah, I don't actually agree with that, but I'm going to pass judgment until we see,
I think
if
that's
we
pretty
ever
much
see one.
the truth, yeah. But anyway, we can talk about that if it comes to pass, that's part of the discussion.
Go ahead.
I do have just, I guess, two other questions. If he sold his land to agricultural use specifically, you're saying this is part of agricultural use?
No.
Or
No, currently no. So
No.
there are agricultural preservation restrictions on much of his property, so his property is pretty heavily protected.
All right, so.
This is not agriculture.
No, this is not.
He's
okay.
not, he doesn't get an ag exempt for this.
Right.
No, I got the plan in terms of what is deeded and what is not deeded to agricultural use. My other question then just goes down to the building, I'm not sure which building, closest to the dance court. I believe that's the new structure. That is within the 50-foot no buffer zone. Just pointing that out.
No, they're not.
I think everything else was, we made them,
Yeah, because I did the site review for the bathrooms. So that's where the bathrooms are.
The building,
Yeah, the new bathrooms.
the new bathrooms are this building right here, and it's outside the 50-foot
Right.
no build zone. This,
Oh, so it's not the third building there?
I don't know what the small building
I
is.
think that was there before. I was
Yeah, there, like I said, there has been,
There's some the old buildings are gonna be tough to, if they're pre-1995, then they're pretty hard to our main concern is this dance floor, depending on how you wanna use, but we've gone through that, so it'll be up to, them to do the diligence and either file an alternatives analysis or pull the plug, one or the other. All right, so let's go to number 2.
Okay. So area number 2 is the area closest to Bradford Street, which is located here on the plan. Currently, as I'm sure you're familiar with, there's an existing structure that they refer to as the farm stand, where you can buy ice cream here on the right, and there's a temporary greenhouse structure on the left that over the years, Mr. Smolak has used for everything from growing plants and selling plants to a congregation area so that somebody can have some food or.
Seeing Santa Claus.
Exactly. So, and I'm a customer as well, living in a nearby town. But he wants to remove that structure and create a more stabilized structure, approximately 1,890 square feet, and actually construct it in kind, similar to the adjacent farm stand. So that's the first part of that parking of that area. The second area is this area in gray, which we are proposing to pave as asphalt. Mr. Smolak, as you probably know, that is currently used as a parking lot, and it's heavily compacted dirt. And based on our analysis and our walk with Jennifer, and I don't want to speak for Jennifer, but we considered it already a degraded area that is used for loading and traffic and whatnot. So even, despite it being durable, there are pockets of area that do erode from time to time, particularly in the loading area where there's trucks that load and create depressions, and sometimes it's the case where there's loading operation that we would want to capture before going into that wetland. So what we're proposing to do is to pave that area and stripe 22 parking spaces. And in an effort to offset that work, we are proposing to create or to install a trench drain starting where my laser is, about 180 feet on the down gradient area of that asphalt lot. The reason why we're trying to collect that water via trench drain as opposed to regrading it into inlets is because you just can't, it's that area is just so wide, it just all sheet flows. So a catch basin wouldn't do any good there. However, we are collecting the pipes from the trench drain and discharging it into a catch basin just for the mere use to utilize its deep sump and its hood. So we want to create a structure to capture and bring it through to create some pre-treatment. There is an inlet on it just for mere observation reasons, and in the event that it does overflow, it does have an opportunity to do so, but it could be a drain manhole should we choose. We submitted some hydraulic calcs that it should never overtop that inlet, but that was the reason for that downstream catch basin.
Lou and I had discussed that. We did talk about improvements to it, but we were kind of misunderstanding. It isn't going to sheet flow to that. It's going to sheet flow to the trench drain. That's just a means of seeing inside.
Yeah,
So
I just thought you were going to funnel all the water from that parking lot into that manhole.
No, that's just not possible. If you look at the grades, we had to meet, we had to meet the deer pen on the right and that leveling area as you walk into the caged animals further to the north. So yeah, that catch basin is just a downstream structure to provide some treatment, because the trench drain doesn't have that depth, that rim to invert depth to provide that hooded structure or that deep sump. And then from that catch basin, we're proposing to outlet it just right next to. There's a current pipe that discharges water runoff from this wetland to that wetland. So we're simply just putting another discharge point at that wetland. Today, Jennifer and I discussed potentially moving that discharge area back into this proposed mitigation area that we are depicting, and we could do that. It's just that the elevation is such that we would have to essentially go to the wetland line and start taking land back to create that elevation to do so. So we could do that. I think the reason why we discharge it where we are is that it's actually going to discharge into water, which will reduce the energy at its point, and then there's an existing outfall right there as well.
I just worry that there's too much that's going to wash off that parking lot that isn't going to be treated, oils, hydrocarbons, all that kind of thing. You are going to settle it out into the catch basin, the sediments out into the catch basin, and based on that cleaning, going to get rid of some of that. But I think more importantly, you need a little more treatment before you discharge that thing to wetland. And so if it's a grass swale or something, but it seems like the right thing to do is not to discharge potentially hydrocarbons and other things off the pavement into that wetland. Because there is no treatment, basically, other than the settling out of the sediment.
Yeah, and the hood, there's, you know,
Right.
I guess technically 25% pretreatment, so, but we're looking at it from the perspective that there's nothing there today, so it's an improvement over existing conditions. But yeah, I see your point, your point's well taken, and what we could do is, like I said, we'd have to bring the grade back. We're, right where we're proposing the restoration plantings, that's currently where the dumpsters are sitting. That's,
It's a
that's-
heavily degraded area, so I don't think
Yes.
anything we do there is, even if it's
Yeah, it's
pulling
gonna
out
make it worse,
soil,
yeah.
is gonna make it worse.
Sure, so that dumpster enclosure is essentially at that wetland line. We're bringing it back 25 feet outside of that disturbance area. And then the area that we are disturbing by removing those dumpsters and the stone dust underneath it is, we're proposing to plant. So we could, in there, provide a little discharge pool with some grass and try to dissipate the energy and also provide some additional treatment there.
Okay. Joe?
So, yeah, I know the parking lot is highly degraded. I'm not concerned at all with paving it. What I'm looking at is a good theoretical approach, schematic approach at best, is the trench drain. Let it sheet across, let it get in there. What's less clear to me is how does the water actually get into the top of the trench drain? I'm looking at the contact detail, which is just a standard detail out of the catalog. It's really not very site-specific. So how do we protect those vertical veins to let the water in? How do they get kept clean? You know, are they off pavement sufficiently enough so they don't get driven over? Guardrails, you know, what's the depth of them? Do they meet H20 loading so they don't get crushed? All those things are just not clear on the plan at this point. With all that said, the approach of getting TSS out through, and oils out through a catch basin structure makes some sense, though typically a catch basin is your first line of defense. You don't usually have a flow through it. So you really need a water quality structure. You don't need a catch basin. Close, but not there. So we need a water quality structure, and then from there, some sort of discharge to a level spreader before you hit the resource area. Those are the things we would typically look for. All of which are lacking in this plan. I do want to point out just as a matter of a point on a paper, the upper left-hand corner of the proposed structure. I recognize it's a greenhouse, but it's going to be a new, more permanent structure, which is fine. It's exactly on the 50-foot no build area, so same comment, but nowhere near as obvious as the one we talked about at Area 1. But you know, got to make sure that structure stays outside of the 50, even if it's.
It's the footprint of the existing structure as well. It's not just a brand new, it's,
Yeah, the existing greenhouse, that corner, to your point, touches the 50-foot. The proposal is to essentially mimic and go up to that same distance. But you're right, your point's well taken. We need to stay out of the 50.
Okay, and that's all I have at this point. Will you I was actually trying to read details when I heard you say dumpster, but I didn't. Are you relocating the dumpster to a different location?
Yes, so the existing dumpster location, if you
Was
look
back
at,
there.
yeah, is within this restoration area. We're actually pulling it out to the 25-foot. It's currently at about 5 feet to the wetland right now.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't think
We would typically try to get it further out, right? Maybe that was already said.
yeah.
Was it? No.
No, I think it's one of my.
Come back to me.
We had that comment today, and I had that discussion with Lou. Again, it's a limited site with limited places to put things. I mean, we can sort of look at alternatives if they can come up with a better spot to put it, but there just aren't a lot of spots to put it. There's a lot of resource area, and then you get into some pretty steep grades, and you're not going to, put the dumpster at the top of the apple orchard. It's just, they could put it maybe in another portion of the parking lot, but I think visitor experience out there, again, not our concern, but, this is a pretty big dumpster, and, it's food waste, and it's not going to be the most sightly thing.
My kids are adults, but when my kids were little, and we used to go there and enjoy all the various things. What I remember the most was apple orchard equals bees, dumpster equals bees en masse. And so you obviously want to keep that as far away from the.
Right, so in the
place
other
that people
parking
are
lot, he has a picnic area, I think. So, I mean, again, it's it would be pretty hard to locate it in another portion of the spot where it's
Well,
accessible to the
I'm asking
use.
to make a consideration of finding another spot if
Right.
if it's
If-
possible, but I don't, I don't think it's first shot we accept it there.
Yep.
Yeah, I
That-
think,
That's it.
oh,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
Yeah, and I echo, many of Joe's points. I think that the corner of the structure is right on the 50. Approvable, but careful foundation staking and on all. You need to be careful on that so you don't have a violation. You do have a retaining wall inside the 50-foot. Don't know if there's any opportunity to minimize that. There's probably an area planned, flat area planned for, who knows, picnic benches or something, but
Which retaining wall?
the retaining wall to the left of the new greenhouse,
Existing, isn't it?
It's an it's
Yeah.
oh, it's an existing?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, I thought that was proposed.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
sorry.
that-
Okay.
that's there.
That's the wattles on the downstream side of that.
My last point is, and I appreciate and acknowledge your plan, restoring that portion of the no disturb zone to natural condition. I also echo Jen's comments about discharging water so that it can be treated within this 25-foot before it does discharge into the wetland. I think that's all good design enhancements. I think you do have an opportunity to swing some or possibly all of that parking area up gradient to conform with the 50-foot no disturb, or the 50-foot no build zone, down in the area where you're proposing the catch basin and the dumpster.
Are you referring to those 5 spaces?
I think you could possibly, and I don't know how you lay out a parking lot, but you seem to have a pretty wide lane of traffic and turnaround between those spaces nearest the wetland and the spaces nearest the farm stand.
That's for the tractor trailers to back into that loading zone.
So there's no opportunity there. I mention it because, you're right up on the 25 at the edge of that pavement. And typically that's something we try to we like to improve through alternatives.
I tried to find my photos, but previously again, this area is all dirt, but he did some improvements there a few years ago at my request when they were doing some other non-jurisdictional work. Because basically everything went right up to the wetland and basically eroded right into it. So it went right up to the wetland before. So I think everything you see, not that more improvements can't be made. And if the turnarounds are enough that you can still get truck traffic and maybe get a few more feet, that would be great. But this will be a huge improvement. I can get some photos for next time too as to what
Okay.
it looks like now.
All set.
Deb?
Is there an O&M plan
Yes.
written? Okay.
And so we had a discussion about some changes to that today as well.
Okay, so it will be updated and
Yep.
comply with the conditions out there.
Yeah, so I guess I did discuss, or I did put in my recommendations to them, and, we might want to see some no snow stockpiling signs. I was a little worried about how the trench drain functions in winter, especially if, snow gets pushed over it, or that was something, I think we'd want to be sensitive to that thing functioning as often as possible. And, de-icing is used on the parking lot, so I guess I was concerned that if it is sand, that there be some kind of sweeping program. And if it is salt, that just knowing that the commission is okay with that, because generally they prohibit de-icing chemicals in the buffer zone, so. But again, existing condition, it's kind of hard to say they can't use anything out there when the safety of the public is going to be somewhat of a concern.
I would be surprised they didn't use that parking lot in the winter.
That they what?
I would be surprised if they use that parking lot in the winter.
If they do or if they,
Huh?
oh, they use that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for trees.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jen, is there a need for storm water management review on this project?
No.
No?
I mean, I think we've had a discussion. I mean, that's always at your discretion. I don't know, this isn't exactly, a new site or a large, I think Joe's provided some feedback, and I guess the question would go to Joe, that if they are able to make the changes that you're requesting, does that seem adequate, or would you want further review?
Yeah, I think it really cuts to the structural survivability of the under drain, the trench drain, in the way to protect the top of it so the water gets into it. I mean, for all intent and purpose, the dirt is impervious. Paving it is just making it a little bit more impervious. So the volume of water is not going to be any different.
Yeah, and we're, I think it's reasonable, I think your comment was reasonable to replace that catch basin with a proprietary device which will provide a little bit more TSS treatment, and we'll work to bring back that outfall to create a more vegetated, stabilized outfall.
In my mind, what I was envisioning is, so if wheel traffic gets on top of those ribs, the fins, to get into the trench drain, that's where the damage occurs.
Yeah, so
if you keep it far enough off the pavement, guardrail perhaps, just to prevent them from getting out there, give it a nice gravel area that the water can get some pre-treatment as it leaves the pavement and then gets into those fins.
Okay, yeah, I think we can look at
And just some details to that effect. And if we're doing that sort of stuff, it really becomes more of a BMP than an analysis. So we wouldn't send anything out for review.
Yeah, so I think, you're providing maybe a stone diaphragm, like a 1 or 2 foot stone diaphragm, just off pavement, and then putting that trench drain, just so that it eliminates truck or vehicular traffic. I think that's reasonable. The guardrail, I think there is some.
Yeah, I was shying away from guardrail at first. I was thinking wheel stops, but then again, it's sheet drainage, and you wanted to get past wheel stops.
And also the transportation of the animals and the trees that they sell during Christmas time. There is truck traffic from an operational standpoint, not so much people visiting the site for truck, but there is, if you go past this area here and up the hill is where they have some additional trees, and then this is the animal cages.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at the photograph. It shows up clearly.
Yeah, so
there's plenty of other driveways and roadways.
Yeah, so there's no reason for people visiting the site to go beyond that, but there will be some turning around for some loading vehicles. So I would advise against doing the guardrail, but I think, perhaps maybe moving that trench drain a little bit off pavement and creating a stone diaphragm could be something that we can look at. We've actually had some luck putting that exact trench drain up onto the asphalt. You just
pave to it.
You just place it flush. And those are H20 loaded, and the actual opening is so thin that when you drive over it, there's, it doesn't really do any damage to it. But the stone diaphragm adds a little bit of a maintenance obstacle, but over time could depress that a little bit. But we're certainly, we definitely, it looks like we have our homework cut out for us on some things, so I'm definitely willing to bring that up to Mr. Smolak to, for his consideration.
So my only consideration in looking at this is just, if it's a structure within 50 foot, you have to have an alternatives analysis, whether it's the dumpster or the pavement shown here. So that's the one thing I would be looking for.
No comments?
This is work out for that?
Yeah.
Do you have any questions on this, Mark?
Not on this one.
Okay.
So, I guess I understand all the points that the board made. I think from my client's perspective, we're not proposing anything new. This all is existing, and from our perspective, we prepared something that we thought was making an improvement to already numerous degraded portions of the site. But I understand the points that the board has made, and I'll take those back. So I guess it really boils down to the structures, essentially. Both the tent and now, if I heard you correctly, the dumpster location.
In the pavement, you know, you have it within, if it's within 50 feet of a wetland, or between 50 and 25, you have to do alternatives analysis as to why it should be within that area, and that would require a waiver as well.
I think the pavement doesn't, in the 50 doesn't require a waiver. The bylaw states that pavement is allowed in the 50 if there is no alternative. The key word, right. But what I want to point out is, this is the parking lot. It's not like, this isn't new parking lot, and they are actually removing portions of what is the impervious area to restore some of that area. I think they could maybe state that better in a way that, and maybe provide some photos of existing versus proposed, because I think what they've done is already try to make it better. And I to Jack's point too about could they pull it back a little more? Maybe, given the use of the property, but nothing in this particular area is new. Anything they're doing is pulling back and restoring. Just so that, I don't think as much work would be required to get this approved. I do think you should look at different dumpster locations if there is some potential alternative. I just think there's a lot that goes on this site, so it's hard to take this out of context, if you ask me.
But we have to look at it with the same eye that we look at every
Yeah,
applicant that comes
no.
in front of us. And, you know, everybody in town, well, I don't know everybody, I love Small Arc Farm, you know, I mean, it's great, it's a great asset, and it's great for the town, but at the same time, we have to look at it the same way we look at every other applicant.
Yeah, and by no means were we trying to get something approved
Yeah,
based on the historical
wasn't suggesting,
significance
right.
of Small Act Farms, but I think we really focused on the perspective from the client himself, that we're actually pulling everything away from the wetland.
Yep.
I think one thing that may help you in your presentation to the commission, just from a visual perspective, because this is very isolated, makes it look very isolated, would be to overlay your plan on an aerial.
Okay.
So that all the other things that are going on around this are clearly visible when it comes to what the alternatives are.
I think the parking lot is approvable in the new addition. The dance floor is off the table as it stands right now.
We can talk about that too.
And then there's the dumpster.
And then
Yeah, so aside from the stormwater and the operation and maintenance stuff, it's really trying to find a new home for the dumpster if we can, or at least pull it just, farther back, and I guess from what I'm hearing, has to be out of the 50 or an alternatives analysis. And then on area 1 is manipulating that to pull that out to the 50.
Yes.
Or provide an alternatives analysis for your consideration.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So we need to continue.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? And that's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
You all set?
I'm just curious as to going forward, any
Well, they're gonna,
We'll meet in 2 weeks.
they come back in 2 weeks.
Well, we'll be at the school administration building. Just as a note, I did put it at the end of this agenda, but the finance committee, I think, is in here. So we have to go back to where we were meeting over at the school administration building.
So 2 weeks, school administration, the same thing?
Yep.
You know, that is the old Tuesday.
Next one. Next one is 242-1523, COC request for 273 Berry Street.
So I think you reviewed this with Heidi at the last meeting. You did an after-the-fact modification to make the patio legal. And you actually have what will be your final monitoring report from Heidi, because she is the only one who had been on this site in like 2 years. So she knew all about the plants, the trash being removed, all the things that I had in my mind were still problems. And she said, nope, good to go. You can issue it. So she even had photos still on her phone.
I don't think you have any questions on this one, so I'll take a motion.
I move that we issue the COC for 242-1523, 273 Berry Street.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Next one is 242-1646, modification request 1 High Street, East Mill.
So the Lake and Pond Management people couldn't be here this evening, so I had Tanya stick around so that she could potentially answer any questions. They proposed to use a new herbicide in the pond. I don't know whether it'll be required this year or needed this year because the pond isn't going to be the same pond it was last year. But regardless, they want to control duckweed, which is a native species actually to my knowledge, but can, when it creates a green sheen over the top of your pond, prevent aquatic vegetation below from thriving. And there's lots of reasons to treat it. They're just looking if it is something they want in their arsenal. The order of conditions says they do need a modification from you to include it. So it has been tested and used on many other waters throughout Massachusetts.
None.
Motion?
Sorry.
Oh, it's fine.
I move that we approve the modification request for 242-1646.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's yours. Well said.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Try and keep it easy.
Yeah, at this point, then I
Try.
think
Well, 242-1592 extension request, Pleasant Street, Stevens Pond.
So this will be the last extension for DPW, to be doing their lake and pond management. I think they had an extension that fell because of the Permit Extension Act, and then they had their first extension, so this is their second and final extension for 1 year. We did get all the monitoring reports, by the way, for 2016, as was required by the permits also.
Any questions, Joe?
None.
Jack? Deb?
No.
Sean?
No?
Doug? All right, motion?
I move that we approve the extension request for 242-1592.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous. Okay, and then we have a update by Mr. Maven on the Osgood Landing.
Yeah, I'll be brief. It's got minimal impact for us. I've been involved in the past year with the committee in community development, chaired by Eric Kafori, with members of the planning board, ZBA, conservation, board of selectmen, and then citizens at large. Has to do with the 40R zoning overlay that was applied to the Aussie properties, Osgood Mill area, 1600 Osgood Street that we all know about. It was approved in 2007. 2007 real estate market was quite different than what it was 1 year later, and then for the next 4 or 5 years. For that reason, you know, the depression in the real estate market, the plan was never implemented. Okay, the plan, and I actually have a copy of it here. That you can pass around. This was the original.
I remember.
This was the original
The mixed-use facility, right?
mixed-use
Ox Ring in the
facility.
back?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
The pertinent parts, right?
So it was basically a combination of residential, 530 units of residential, retail, and industrial and recreational, all on the same site. They were going to try and get a train station, a train stop in there as well. So anyway, it was quite the ambitious plan. It never came to be. And so what has actually happened in the meantime has been that no new development has happened on the site. They've basically sold off square footage of office space primarily and yard space to different clients. The town was one of them.
You mean leased them?
Yeah, leasing. Yeah, I'm sorry, I said sold, but selling, leasing time. But anyway, so they're selling office space, they're selling space on site to do laser tag, the Northern Essex truck training program, various office, you know, all that stuff, which is all good. You know, they got to stay in business, but they haven't been doing any development. So the relevancy of the 40R is the reason why the committee was formed, and what do we do about it? So we've looked at it and talked about many things, as all committees do, and basically the recommendation was made to the selectmen last night, and I apologize, I haven't kept the commission informed. The conservation impacts are very low on this site, but anyway, the recommendation was that the 40R should be reconsidered in context with the master planning, the town's master planning process, which is ongoing now and will be, have preliminary results within the year. So with guidance from that and input from the owners, the thought is that, okay, we should take that combined goals, try to find some common ground and zone it properly for the benefit of both parties. So, that's the general direction that was recommended by the committee to the selectmen. Tactically, we offered 3 options to the selectmen. Option number 1 was to do nothing option, leave 40R in place with possible minor modifications. Option 2 was to put a moratorium on the implementation of 40R, and the option 3 was to strike it completely, to just rescind it and have it revert back to the industrial zoning that it's in right now. In the analysis and discussions, really the main thing, the main concern, I think, by the town, probably somewhat by this commission, was the ability for the owner to implement 530 housing units on that site. Again, with what has happened since 2007 to now, we've had some pretty big 40Bs go in, lots of housing's gone in. Yet another one wouldn't be necessarily a positive thing if it was rental units, small families, things like that. So, the town was, taking pause with that scenario. So to leave it in place, option 1, leave it in place, wasn't considered a real, favorable option, in the context of the discussions. Option 2, put a moratorium on it. Sounds like it makes sense. And you could re-implement it if you did have a good plan, a nice plan that would benefit the town as well. But after review by town council believes that the opinion of the town council is that they couldn't prohibit the housing portion of it, which was the major concern of the town and the committee. Okay, so that wouldn't have worked toward the goals of the town to put the moratorium in. So, the discussions seem to lead toward rescinding it in total, as an attractive option. And I'll state, for you guys that was my opinion. That is my opinion. On what the selectmen should do. Now, if it is rescinded, there was a payment made, let's see, to the town, I think, from the owner through the state to the town, and it was $600,000. That money would have to be returned. Okay, and so, there's a financial impact to the town.
If it's rescinded.
If it's rescinded, yeah, that's option 3. So, these options were presented to the selectmen Monday night, and really the main point of the committee was that the option should be considered in the context of the new master planning process. So I'll open it up for discussion with the commission.
So the selectmen just take it all under advisement, or do they render a decision on their own last night?
Well, it's kind of time sensitive, Joe, because they have to do something because the warrants for town meeting are due. And if they want to rescind it, they need to have a 2/3 majority in the town meeting to rescind it. So they would, there'd have to be some groundwork done
40
there.
is an overlay district, isn't it?
It's an overlay, yeah, over I-2.
Over I-2?
Yeah, so it's,
So what, again, you guys did hard work, and here I am listening for 35 seconds. What good does rescinding it do if it's an overlay? You just simply don't utilize the overlay, you just use the industrial piece of it.
because the overlay allows for 530 units of residential housing to go in, where I-2 wouldn't allow that.
But if it comes in as a 40B, it's going to happen regardless. But no,
We're 40B compliant though.
we are fully compliant, we've hit, so we don't need the housing units anymore. We've met the threshold, I didn't know that.
I thought we were like 130 short, yeah.
I thought, he told me we were there. We're not there.
Yeah, I thought we were a little bit
But we're
short.
not
We're short.
540 units short.
I don't know exactly. I know that,
We're like 130 short,
right.
I think.
We're still short,
And
though.
if you did rental units, you get 100% credit for
So
rental
that
units.
includes Berry Farms already, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. I mean, that's a tough
So-
choice. You had no good choices.
So
Don't want to
I,
give $600,000 back.
actually, I have a document that I can email you guys. If you do have an opinion as a private citizen, and would like to,
Please look at the camera when you say that.
okay, this I think we don't have to find. And write a letter to the selectmen with your opinion, to try and influence them. We could also state an opinion as the commission on which way we want to go. Again, I think our jurisdiction is strictly limited to the residential portion of that proposal, and it's kind of small potatoes. I think the larger issues are the issues of the town and the ability of the owner to develop the 530 units of residential, and I think it would probably be a negative thing for the town.
I give them $600,000 there to give back, you kind of scared them away.
Well, isn't this part of, they have ulterior uses for the property in mind, so how does that affect the, if they begin to use this property for the uses they've been describing,
Ship has sailed.
why does this even matter?
Exactly. That's why I asked the overlay question. If they can do it's permissible under industrial,
Right.
you basically boxed out any future 40-hour prospect.
And if they propose to do what they propose to do, they're not going to be building a residential subdivision on the property anyway.
If they do what they originally proposed, they would.
No, it says currently, what's going on
No,
now?
currently they they want to use it as a marijuana growing facility.
Well, yeah, actually, it's just
I mean, that's out there. There's been a
It
lot of
is.
public hearings about that.
Absolutely.
So that's why I'm wondering, and I'm not,
What they
I don't
wanna
have
do-
a say per se.
I listened to one of the owner's agents talk about that on Monday night, actually, and he said their concept is to use the big industrial building in the center of the site, use that and set that up, and it's been pretty well upgraded by Verizon too, to use that as a place where you could set up medicinal marijuana refining, processing facilities, like a plant. It wouldn't be a retail site, it would be a site where, you would bring in raw materials, presumably marijuana and packaging and whatever you needed to convert it to medicinal marijuana. you did that, you would do that, and that would be packaged in, pharmaceutical grade type packages, shipped to dispensaries elsewhere, not proposed under this Aussie Properties proposal, and
still have your residential subdivision on site?
no, they're actually asking for the entire site to be listed as a medicinal marijuana property, so they could do anything on there. The concept is to make a little plant there and then have the surrounding office buildings be converted to labs and research facilities and things like that would support such a business.
Is the owner Aussie Properties?
Yeah.
The name Bill?
Yeah. That's the concept, what they're actually, they're trying to put it in a good light, and you'll probably hear something like that at town meeting when you hear about it from the owners, so.
So you suggested private people write letters, fine, but I don't think, my guess is the commission has no stake in the discussion. It's great to have a seat at the table to participate as part of the whole, but.
There are a lot of wetlands on site.
Yeah,
but,
I don't think we have
whatever
any
comes
stake in-
before us will have to come before us. It's not like
Yeah.
R4 gives them any pass, per se, to the permitting process.
Right.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay, let's do decisions.
2 decisions.
242-1699.
Yep, so, like I said, this one has a few sort of conditional provisions in it, things that we haven't worked out all the details. The first probably starts with condition number 35, which is the mitigation area, where we don't have all the final details, so I just put it that they would, comply with section 6 of the bylaw regulations. We need a planting plan, just things they didn't have time to pull together for this particular filing, but the area's been designated and put aside, so I don't really have concerns. It'll be a buffer zone mitigation. There's only a fringe of buffer out there now, so they'll be restoring buffer zone. 36 is just that they will then monitor that area for the typical 2 growing seasons.
Were there any downstream disturbances, stuff moving through that pipe?
It's
that need
hard to
clean
tell
up?
because there's, just in
Ice.
talking about that pipe being very full, they do have a turbidity curtain downstream and they'll keep it there.
But
so
no,
I don't,
maybe some restoration, but no mitigation.
no, yeah, nothing like that. They're already working at the other end. They have all their work for the West Mill at the other side. There's a condition in here about the. So they do have a waiver request, which we did approve. Mitigation area, I'm trying to look. Erosion controls. I put the bond at 10,000. The 25-foot no disturbance zone, they've marked the other side of the pond. I'm assuming that what they would mark in this portion of their work would be basically the outlet structure through the mitigation area, and it wouldn't necessarily be 25 foot, it would be the limits of the mitigation area and then sort of the existing development along the pond. So to the stormwater management conditions, I would add a condition about the cameras, and I would put that more as a maintenance condition, that the integrity of the pipe shall be monitored through cameras as proposed by the applicant or something like that. Nothing too binding. Oh, here it is. 58 is prior to installation, final designs for all structures shall be submitted for review and approval. So anything where they don't have the final design, we'll get to see the final design. And it's either you or me, and I'll work that out with Lou, what he thinks is appropriate. Silt sacks, we have the new dewatering detail, condition 60. I just have them sweeping pavement daily because, there's a lot of material moving out there. No stockpiling within 100 feet.
Is that
They're on the other side.
accurate? Is it
They're-
within 100 feet of a different resource?
No, I think on the other side, it's more in those historic drainage structures, which we didn't really call out, but the whole thing's protected by erosion control now. I can,
They're trucking it over
The
across
lim-
the street.
I mean, most of their stockpiling is done now, right?
I
Yeah,
think
it
they're,
is.
I think
Yeah,
they're
the
pretty
other
much
mill.
done. I think they're now waiting for just some final, if there's some fly ash, they believe, in the soil, so they're waiting to make sure they can dispose of it the way they want to. My only other question comes to snow stockpiling. I think we should probably require one sign. I'm not sure what the final pavement configuration will be when they're done, but we definitely don't want them stockpiling snow over that, or in front of that outlet structure, I would assume.
That's right.
So I think I'll condition one sign in that particular location. And the rest is standard. I did beef up the as-built condition so that we get, plans should include inverts of all drainage structures above and below grade, and tape, just so we know all the inverts and outlets of those structures once they're installed. I think Lisa was really concerned that we have those elevations. It was difficult to find them on the old plans. RCG did provide them to Lisa, but just having all that information handy will be good in the future. That's it.
So even if the Corps takes jurisdiction, we're not a party to that at all. It's going to be a
No.
separate action unto themselves. But sometimes the work that, we can make something that's more restrictive to their permit. So do we make some sort of reference? Do we want to be a party to that? Do we want to at least get a copy of it?
We could put that in the condition requiring them to get all necessary permits is a pre-construction condition in all our permits. 43, so I can just, nope, that's not it.
I think we should just have that in our file in an official capacity.
That we want a copy of it.
That was a question that was asked on Saturday, how do we know when you guys have reached a decision? Sometimes it,
So 26 says the order does not relieve the permittee or any other person the necessity of complying with all other applicable federal blah, 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 blah. I'll just add a statement that says we want a copy.
yes. Good.
Any more questions? Motion?
Move that we issue the order of conditions for 242-1699 as drafted and amended.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Next one is 242-1696.
Royal Crest.
Oh, thank you. So I actually put in this one that I'm not going to issue it until I get a revised plan with the things we asked for on it. It's just, I don't want to be chasing these things down on this particular project. There's too much going on out there.
So you want to leave this one for now?
No, this is, it's fine to issue it. Condition 27 does not belong in there. I don't know what that is. That condition is repeated, though, condition 32. 27 just needs to come out. I didn't, for some reason, see that. .37 is the condition about the replication, and it requires all plantings to be native. 38 is the requirement for monitoring. I don't know about the bond, 5,000, it's bioretention cells, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Seems reasonable.
Yeah, it does. Not sure we have much past practice on this.
So I think in 54 is we did have discussions about how we're going to keep them from accidentally mowing the basins, and I think we discussed basically those basins would have markers on them. That brings me back briefly, I know what I wanted to point out to you, that in condition 37, I point out that the proposed bioretention cells will function as replicated wetlands and shall not be altered without a filing to the NACC. I'm not going so far as to give them a buffer zone, but they can't just they're altering 2,000.
So we know what that means, but the owner and the landscape management company, what does that mean to them?
Do we need it as like
Can
a
we just simply say,
perpetual?
you shall not mow them? I mean, what does that condition actually say?
Well, they need to maintain them, but that the actual square footage of the bioretention cells is actually replication for altered BVW. And Lisa was fine with that. I mean, the BVW we were altering was constructed drainage swales from like the 1970s and BVW associated with them. But just that they can't just decide they don't want the bioretention swale and get rid of it.
No,
So
and I understand.
Can we say that they shouldn't be altered and if maintained in kind?
Well, that's what I say, but I guess to Joe's point, like, where do you put that so that, I guess it needs to be a perpetual condition.
So the people actually carrying out the work aren't going to read it, and maybe their boss isn't going to read it, but the boss's boss, who's put the bid in for that year's landscaping, might read it. Remember, we had a problem of them undoing things or cutting things down because they had a new landscape company. Remember, he told you that?
Yep.
So it's going to be, unless it's crystal clear, they're not going to have a chance of understanding what that means.
Well, I think we just put at least in the perpetual conditions that we've done this before, that they can't be just removed they need to be maintained per the O&M plan and kept in place as replication going forward.
And Ken mentioned about he has a training program whenever they hire a new contractor. I mean,
Yeah, I've been to it.
you have, that's exactly my point. Is it maybe something to that effect of like obligate him to have that program? Put it in order condition so that way that's the opportunity where those things can get pointed out?
That's actually a perpetual condition in one of their other programs, so maybe just reiterate it.
Pull it into this one.
Are we asking for signage around these areas?
That's what I'm saying. I do propose that in
Here.
Another condition.
Some of the guys
Further down.
performing this work don't read those signs.
Right.
Have the ability
And it
to.
would also be on the fencing on the far side of the bioretention swale as well.
In Spanish?
How about Cambodian?
I did $60,000 worth of landscaping on the Blue Hills Parkway, and all it took was one Department of Corrections workforce to come down there and weed the islands and pull out all of the freaking plants because they thought they were weeds.
And then we're also going to put
Pulled out
No
every
s-
single one.
no snow stockpiling signs adjacent to the
Great
basins.
maintenance.
Don't want to plow snow into them. All right, I think we're good. Amended.
Okay, any questions?
Move that we issue the order of conditions for 242-1696 as drafted and amended.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous.